I now call the February 24th meeting of the Wallingford-Swarthmore School Board to order. In addition to those you see before you, we have Mr. Ballas on the phone. Jerry, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So we have 9 voting board members present. In opening, as you're willing and able, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. First up, we have the student representatives report. Ms. Sharman.
Thank you. This Thursday, February 27th, NPE will host STEM night from 6:30 to 8 p.m. Students will have the opportunity to walk around different stations set up in the gym, exploring topics such as microscopy, biology, electricity, and fortune-telling. There will be numerous prizes available for participation and many fun demonstrations and experiments to watch. The following Thursday, March 5th, NPE will have its annual Read Across America Family Night from 6:30 to 8 p.m. There will be 16 different books being read around the school by NPE teachers, current and retired, as well as Miss Lori from the Helen Kate Furness Free Library. Students can choose any 2 stories to listen to. Afterwards, students and their parents can come down to the gym to participate in any of the activities, including a book giveaway, where students can choose 2 books to take home with them, bookmark crafting, character coloring pages, a Hogwarts house sorting, and much, much more. Students are encouraged to dress up as a character in a book to help them get into the story and win a prize at the door. There will also be a Read Across America Day at West this Friday, February 28th. Students are encouraged to dress up in their pajamas so they can get comfortable while they listen to the stories being read. Next Thursday, March 5th, there will be a 5th grade dance celebration at West at 7 p.m. For the past few weeks, students have been practicing several dances in gym class, including the Cotton Eye Joe, Thriller, and Footloose. Each 5th grade class will choose a dance and dress up in a corresponding costume to perform for parents and teachers on Thursday. Finally, next Monday, on March 9th, West will have a family night at Oasis from 6 to 8 p.m. Box tops are due to SRS by Monday, March 2nd. The school receives 10 cents for each redeemed box top. Last year, students raised over $800. If you have any box tops, please cut them out and drop them off at the SRS lobby. You can also scan and submit your box tops online if they are clipless. In addition to box tops, SRS is also collecting books. The school is collecting new and gently used books to donate to students at East Lansdowne Elementary School in the William Penn School District. If you have any books at home to donate, please get them in by Friday, March 6th. The middle school would like to extend a hearty congratulations to the entire cast and crew of High School Musical. Each performance was special and amazing, and the whole community is very proud. This Friday, the middle school will have the annual 7th grade Winterfest beginning at 6:30 p.m. in the gym. 7th graders will enjoy an evening of games, dancing, and food. This Thursday, the high school will have its Black History Month assembly featuring dance performances from the students and guest speaker Kelly Yedem. Ms. Yedem has taught underserved middle schoolers in a Philadelphia charter school as well as elementary schoolers right here in the Wallingford-Swarthmore School District. She will discuss the importance of creating educational spaces that are reflective of all students, since one of the many ways children develop their identity and build their confidence is by seeing themselves in their school settings. Then on Friday, the high school will have its annual Chris King basketball tournament. Throughout the day, classes will face off against each other in friendly games of basketball. Each class pays $1 to play, raising money for the Chris King Scholarship. Each year, the school awards a scholarship to a student they feel embodies Chris King, a Strathaven student who lost his life due to a brain tumor years ago, but never lost his courage, kindness, or spirit. At the end of the day, the students will play the teachers in a game of basketball and hopefully redeem themselves after ending the last student-teacher football game in a draw. Finally, the production of Chicago will begin this weekend with the first show this Saturday at 7:30 p.m. and another show on Sunday at 2 p.m. Everyone is encouraged to attend. Thank you.
Thank you, Salma. Next, we have the superintendent's report. Dr. Palmer.
Thank you, Dr. Grandi. And I have a number of items to speak about tonight. First, I'd like to comment on items on our agenda this evening. And on Tuesday, February 18th, we had a Finance Committee meeting. At that meeting, we had significant discussion around 2 topics. First was an opportunity for a bond refunding, and second was a look at our capital projects needs for the next 5 years and beyond. To share the items with a wider community, those 2 items are presented as focus topics this evening. Under the finance section on our agenda, I'd like to highlight 2 particular items. And the first one is the Cognos upgrade. The administration is recommending that the board approve an agreement with PowerSchool for upgrading Cognos, which is the report writer software within our financial information system. Why I mention this is because it looks like we've had PowerSchool on our agenda many times this year, and we have. PowerSchool is a rapidly growing company that has purchased a number of companies with which we have already contracted. PowerSchool provides our student information software system, which is new for us this year. PowerSchool also owns Talent Ed, which is the software we use for human resources, eCollect and Acela, which is the software program we use for registration and our forms generation within PowerSchool, and SunGuard, which was the name of our financial management system. Tonight's agenda item pertains to our financial management system and not our student information management system. Our version of the Cognos software is at the end of its life, and we must upgrade in order to maintain support for the product. The second item on our agenda that I'd like to focus on is a resolution calling for charter school funding reform. In the resolution, we are advocating for substantial change, and we're urging for revisions to the current charter school tuition calculation to ensure a fair funding formula for both regular and special education charter school tuition that is based on the cost to educate the students at this charter school and not on the cost to educate a child in the Wallingford-Swarthmore School District. As a point of reference, based on the current formula used by PDE, our district pays $523,312 for 27 students. We pay $14,606 each for our 18 regular education students and $37,750 each for our 9 students with special needs. Of the 27 students, 24 students attend a cyber charter and 3 attend a brick and mortar charter. Based on the numbers that I just mentioned, we pay $19,014 per child attending a cyber charter school, which is exorbitant, and it has no relation to the cost borne by the cyber charter school. In the resolution, we're asking the General Assembly to meaningfully revise the existing flawed charter school systems of funding regular and special education students to ensure that school districts and taxpayers are no longer overpaying for these students or reimbursing charter schools for costs they don't incur. The entire resolution is included in tonight's agenda, which is in board docs. Secondly, I'd like to talk about an item that's not related to the agenda, and I'd like to talk about the governor's budget now. When Ms. Q presented the proposed preliminary budget on January 13th, she mentioned that Governor Wolf would be presenting his budget on February 4th. Since that time, she had an opportunity to attend budget briefings by the Pennsylvania School Boards Association and by the Pennsylvania Association of School Business Officials. In those briefings, we learned a number of things, a few of which I would like to highlight tonight. The governor's proposed budget shows a 1.6% overall increase in our basic education subsidy and a 2.1% overall increase in special education subsidies. For us, it could mean $38,000 and $28,000 respectively in those two subsidies. While we are appreciative that the subsidies would increase rather than decrease, the proposed budget does nothing to change Pennsylvania's overall support for public education. Pennsylvania still ranks 44th in the nation in education revenue by allocating only 38.7% of the state revenue toward education. With the state allocating considerable additional funds, without the state allocating considerable additional funds to education, the burden will still remain on our local taxpayers to fund our schools. Secondly, Governor Wolf proposed comprehensive charter school reform as part of his 2021 budget. It would reform the charter school law by increasing transparency, accountability, and establishing a more reasonable funding formula, which includes the establishment of a flat statewide cyber charter school tuition rate of $9,500 per student. While this doesn't exactly fund charter schools based on their actual costs, it does reflect an average charter school cost per student. And we're very eager to see if this proposed legislation will actually have any traction with the legislature. The governor's budget also includes a proposal for universal, free, full-day kindergarten. And I have to pause as I consider this proposal. Universal, free, full-day kindergarten. And I pause, not that because I'm against full-day kindergarten, I'm not, but because we would have to provide it for free without any funding from the state. Only 17 states in the District of Columbia require students to attend some form of kindergarten, and Pennsylvania is not one of them. We currently have 6.5 teachers teaching 13 half-day kindergarten classes. This would mean another 6.5 teachers, construction costs for additional classrooms, supplies and equipment for those classrooms, and additional buses to transport kindergartners at the same time as our elementary students. The costs would be enormous, and I don't even know how we would accomplish this within the allowable Act 1 index tax increase. Within the governor's proposal, there is a provision that would allow districts with capacity issues to apply for a hardship waiver, meaning that we couldn't move to a full-day kindergarten right now, but we would need to include a plan for expanding our capacity to accommodate this. It's not a waiver to not do it. It's a waiver to not do it right now. I'm still grappling with the magnitude of this proposal, and I cannot imagine how it can be imposed upon us, particularly without any funding to accompany it. We will definitely be watching this proposal very, very carefully. Needless to say, we will have much more information to share about the budget as our legislators continue or consider the governor's proposal. We're hopeful that we'll know before June 30th what that budget is, but there have been some years that we've gone beyond June 30th. But we are definitely staying tuned to see what the impact of the governor's proposal will have on us. And Dr. Grandy, I think that's plenty for me tonight, so I'll conclude my report.
Thank you, Dr. Palmer. Board announcements. The board did meet prior to this meeting this evening in executive session to discuss litigation, a specific personnel matter, and to obtain privileged advice from counsel. Next up on the agenda, we're going to move on to the focus topics that Dr. Palmer just mentioned. Again, we have two of them this evening, one on the bond refunding, and the other is the capital projects 5-year plan. With that, I will turn things back to you, Dr. Palmer, to introduce the first.
Thank you. I see in the audience, as I look out, we have with us this evening Mr. Brad Remick, who is the Managing Director of PFM Financial Advisors. He is part of the group that is the financial advisor for our district. He was with us at our Finance Committee meeting last week when he presented a bond refunding opportunity. And as we were discussing what we would need to move forward with that opportunity, we realized it has been quite some time since the board actually passed a parameters resolution that would allow us to do this. So we asked Mr. Remick, would he join us this evening, walk us back a little bit in time to when we passed the parameters resolution, and describe what the board may be considering at this moment for a refunding opportunity. So Mr. Remick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Palmer. It's good to be back here and see everyone again. As was mentioned, we had a really good, robust discussion last week, and I thought this was a great idea to get back here and give the full board discussion, not only in public, but also for those of you that weren't able to make the meeting, to talk a little bit about what it is that we're doing. As was mentioned, part of my job at PFM is I work with the school district when it comes to these types of bonds and things of the like, to make sure that we're doing everything we can to save you as much money as we can in your budgets. Much like when you purchase your home with your home mortgage, you usually lock an interest rate, and then what happens is you probably continue to monitor it and see if interest rates fall, is there any opportunity for you to refinance and potentially save some money. Same thing with some of your personal loans and things of the like. That's my job for the school district, is to make sure that when you do issue bonds for various capital projects, you can't issue municipal bonds for operations, but you can basically issue them for your capital program, is to make sure that I keep in touch with the administration and the board as to any opportunities there are to potentially lower your payments. And that does seem to be the situation here. So I'll go through a couple things real quickly with you. First is, and I think a lot of you hopefully have a hard copy in front of you as well, but this is an interest rate chart. Again, as I mentioned before, when schools in Pennsylvania issue bonds, typically they're done in the form of tax-exempt bonds. Okay, those are where ultimate purchasers don't have to pay taxes on the interest they receive. It's kind of a benefit that's passed on to local governments to be able to finance capital projects to keep costs down. So MMD, it means municipal market data, and that's the index we look at. You're all probably familiar with the Dow Jones and the NASDAQ and the S&P 500. You know, all those different markets have their indices. MMD is really the one that we look at. This is a 20-year historical perspective for you, kind of graphs along the line over time, left to right. You can see there's a blue box which kind of isolates where we are more recently. You will notice there's also a little legend in the top, and it talks about what the index's high has been, average has been, and where it is right now, low, all-time lows, current, things of the like, to give you a flavor for where we are today versus where we've been historically. You will notice that in this 20-year period, the index, the max, is over a little over 5. Again, don't get too hung up necessarily on the number itself, okay? But just kind of think about it as an index. The average for the last 20 years is 3. The all-time low was 1.15 at the end of January. And right now, we're at about a 1.19 here in February. I actually was just mentioning, I was just away, and when I looked on my phone today, when I got off my plane, that index today, the current, is below the all-time lows now, okay? We're below the 1.15, which is an update for the Finance Committee as well. So, okay, interest rates are low. What does that mean? Well, then we take a look at what Wallingford-Swarthmore School District has for its existing debt. This looks a little messy, if you will. I'll call it all these different payments on these different bonds look like they're all over the place, things like that. But if you really kind of go to the right in the total, you'll notice that for all intents and purposes, the budgetary amount that's in the amount of money that's in your budget to pay debt service is about $7.6 million, and it's relatively steady for the next 8 or so years, and then it begins to drop off. I think that might lend nicely into your discussion later. We won't go there for now, but this kind of gives you an idea of what your overall debt structure is. Municipal bonds are slightly different than your home mortgage and car loans because whenever you issue municipal bonds, there's typically a period for which the bonds cannot be prepaid without a penalty. That's anywhere from 5 to 7 years is typically the case. Okay, so we have to kind of keep that in mind as well. There are footnotes on the bottom. The second footnote is the one we're going to talk about tonight. It's the Series A of 2012 that was actually callable 3 years ago, which I think is why Dr. Palmer wants us to refresh and go back where we were 3 years ago. But that bond, because the rate on it is so low already, it didn't look like there was going to be a lot of money to save on it. But now, from my prior page, you'll notice that rates are so low, it's time to kind of relook at that one again because it does look like it's callable with some savings on it. The one thing you'll also notice in footnote 3 is the Series C of 2012 is also callable in May. But since we're spending a little bit of time on this topic, if you were to go up to column 3, right here, you'll notice that bond doesn't have a whole heck of a lot of money left on it, and it's relatively short in time. So there's probably not going to be a benefit, as in fact we've looked at it, by refinancing that just because there's some costs associated with it. And there's not much on it, it's not very long, so that's probably why that one's not going to be the focus. And that's why we're looking at the Series A of 2012s. Going back, Dr. Palmer mentioned what we call a parameters resolution. And in order for us to do any financing, whether it be for new money projects or refinancing, the board needs to take action on a resolution. It's called the bond resolution, parameters resolution. They're all kind of words we use interchangeably. So the board would need to approve incurring any debt, as we call it. In 2017, in October, the board at that time did authorize a resolution to do many things. One of those things was to refinance your 2011 B bond, 2012 B bond, I should probably use this, 2013 and 2014. That's what that action took place almost, I guess it's about 2.5 years ago to be able to do all this. In fact, in 2017, we were able to refinance the 2014 bonds. That 2014 bond actually had a variable rate of interest on it. And the board said, okay, we would like to lock or fix the rate on that. The board had really experienced some real savings through that period of time, but it kind of was decided, let's lock in the rate for that and get away from the variable rate component of that bond issue. So that was done successfully in October of 2017. In November of 2017, the district executed a refinancing of the 2011 B bonds. And we did so with a fixed-rate bank loan. We actually went to a bank, TD Bank, and they offered us a fixed-rate loan. That's one of our jobs here to work as, too, is we don't We don't have the money. It's our job to look at banks, look at bonds, whatever it may be. What's the best way, lowest cost of capital for the district? And in fact, November of 2017, the 2011B bonds were fixed, and we saved over about $400,000 from that. In May of last year, it took a little bit of time. We had to kind of sit on the sidelines, I'll call it, for about 18 months. The market kind of bounced around on us, but we really kind of kept a close eye on the 2013 bonds. So we did the 14s, the 11Bs, and then the 13s came into play for significant savings last year. And the district actually did a public bond issue at that time to refinance the 2013 bonds and save about $358,000. So of the 4 bonds that have been part of that resolution, we've done 3, and here we are for number 4. We've patiently waited for this situation to occur. One of the things that the district has always done has held a very high standard for doing a refinancing. Because if you do a refinancing, as I mentioned earlier, you're probably not going to have a chance to refinance again for at least 5 years. And there's closing costs associated with it. And there's administrative time that we really take away from people doing other things here to actually focus on doing these bonds, because there's a lot of legal work, a lot of disclosure that needs to be done. So we want to make sure that when we do these things really count for the district, okay? I'll come back to this page in a second because I have a timeline on the bottom, but I wanted to show you the magnitude of your patience and what that's meant. There's a lot of stuff going on this page, but this 2012 bond has about $10 million left on it, and you'll notice this is if you do nothing, these would be your payments right here. We're estimating that if you issue the bond at today's rates, your payments would drop down over $500,000. Okay? The rate on the 2012A bond is about 2.6%. The rate that we're estimating on the new bond would be about 1.6%. Okay? So we're dropping about a full percent on $10 million, and the term of the bond is about 7 years. We're not stretching it out at all. We're going to pay it off in the same amount of time. We're getting rid of the 2.6. We're going to pay the 1.6. We're going to save $500,000 over the life of that issue. That also, I should make sure you are aware, that is net of any closing costs. Okay, so we want to show the board the net impact of doing that, and this is kind of what you're looking at for 2012A. The discussion was favorable last week, I'll call it, in terms of pursuing this option. I think people get a little bit leery of these if you're stretching payments dates out or doing something crazy like that. But I think we decided that just to keep the same term and lower the rates was the best interest of moving forward. So we are going to start working with Martha and the administration probably towards the end of this month to get all the information that's necessary. When you do a bond, you have to go through a credit review process, much like you might have to do when you do your mortgage. We have to do that, go through with one of the rating agencies. We have to put together a prospectus. If you've ever bought a mutual fund, if you get something in the mail from Vanguard or whoever you use, there's a prospectus. Well, guess what? We got to do something like that when we do bonds, so people that are all over the country know a little bit about what's going on here in this community, how the finances look. So we have to do those 2 main things over the next couple weeks. We would then, in the middle part of March, probably have that credit rating review. It's a fun process, Martha. Always love that, right? All these questions, and we're on the phone there, obviously, as well with her to make sure we go through that process. She always does a great job. Then we could hopefully lock the rate in March and close in mid to late April. So everything I've shown you here is an illustration. The savings aren't going to get locked in until we get these other things done. Market's going to go like this, it's going to go like that. But one of the things that is always important to state is that the district has, again, I've mentioned before, has a high standard in terms of doing these. And that typically, that guideline is 3% of the bonds refunded as savings. So if you're refinancing a $10 million bond, a 3% minimum target would be $300,000. My job is to get you 500, 600, 700, whatever I can get. That's my job. I have a fiduciary responsibility to get you as much as I can. I don't manage to a target. But if we were going to go through this process and then we picked up the phone and called Dr. Palmer and Martha and said, hey, savings are 225, guess what? We're back on the sidelines. We're going to have to wait till this thing comes back to, again, that higher standard and the like. So that's kind of what's going on here. One of the other things that was talked about at Finance Committee that I should bring up here too is that if you noticed, this bond had about 7 years left on it. And I mentioned to you that quite often that the prepayment provisions are at least 5 years. One of the things that we're going to talk a little bit about with the underwriters is that if we give that up, can we get more savings? For example, right now they're telling me that if I don't allow for prepayment after 5 years, I can get 500. I think the number was like 300 or something like that, a little bit lower. So this is something we're going to try and do as your advisor to get the 5-year prepayment provision in there. We're not sure because there's only 7 years left on it. I'm not sure what that option. I got to think about what that option's worth. I'm not sure I'm willing to give up $200,000 for that option. But that's kind of something I'll work through. But I just want to mention that as well because I know we talked about it at Finance Committee a little bit last week. So with that, how'd I do? Good. Okay.
Can I ask you a question, though?
Sure.
Could you just give a quick explanation? When you look at the savings, it looks like the savings are mostly pushed out in 2026, 2027. Could you just walk through the reason for that?
I'm glad you brought that up. You'll notice, I'm going to go back real quick since we're doing, you'll notice here that your overall debt structure, all of them are structured very different ways. This one that we're talking about happens to be more back-end loaded because those payments kick in as other bonds get paid off. You can kind of see, hopefully if you can see that. So what happened is because of the back-end nature of this bond, the savings it's more difficult to get those savings up front for you. They kind of fall in those last couple years, if you will. We would certainly want to make sure that when we start looking at the pricing, we talk to the administration to say, hey, this is where it looks like the savings would occur. So you have some choices. But right now, based on what the way that this bond is structured with its back-end weighted, most of the savings are this year. I'd also like to give you the option, if we can get prepared to get the bond and closed before your next payment. I think it's in May 1st or May 15th or something of this year. You may have the option to get some more of the savings in this year's budget. So that's something we want to keep open to you. We can always discuss it later once we get there, but that's something I'd like to try and get done for you so you have that choice.
Great, thank you. Do other board members have questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
I do. The second item that we had talked about at length at the Finance Committee meeting was a look 5 years into the future at our capital planning needs. And we were going through each and every one of the projects that Mr. Abbott, our Director of HR and Operations, was presenting. And we thought that might be a little daunting to go through everything at that level of detail this evening. But he's created an overview so that we can give the flavor to the community with what are those projects that we're looking forward to doing in the 2021 school year, and what are those items that are on the horizon by school for beyond next school year. One of the things that we talk about is we have needs for our general fund budget, but we also have longer-term capital needs. And the presentation tonight, our objective is to highlight what those projects are that are on the horizon right now, and to give the community the magnitude of what those projects might look like 5 years and beyond. So, Mr. Abbott, I see you at the podium. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present what the capital plan looks like for the next 5 years and really beyond. First off, I'd like to explain a little bit about the capital plan in that these are items that need to be done, projects that need to be done throughout the district that are not recurring. They would not fall under the normal operations budget, and they're not a normal expense of doing business from year to year. It's a constantly changing list. Since I presented to the Finance Committee last Tuesday, an item or two have changed already. Facing constantly, we have a changing level of priority. While we think items may be 5 years out, they could end up being pushed ahead or go later, as well as newly identified projects that come about. All the information that's presented in the capital projects plan is based upon information from our district engineer, that's Cerillion Associates, or a commission survey we've had done, or through our own knowledge. I'd like to start with Nether Providence Elementary. It's really our newest building. It was completely renovated with new construction in 2014. And if you take a look at how the projects we have through the next year, we really don't have anything that would fall in the capital projects plan. Beyond that, we want to regrade some hard surface, and we also want to complete the automation of our lighting, both inside and outside, with a projected amount of $45,000. That looks good for NPE, and it should. It's a new building. We move on to Swarthmore Rutledge, which last saw its renovation in 2004, with that building being built in 1929, and it's going to show a different story than NPE. So through the next year, both in the main building and the annex that's behind it, we need to do a variety of projects totaling $305,000. We need to replace the foyer floor, improve the drainage off to Princeton Avenue from the playground in the back. We need to automate the lighting there. We anticipate replacing the annex roof, and we need to continue replacing the annex windows. Beyond that, we have to perform some upgrades to the electrical service there, replace the public address system. We need to update the lighting and go with LED. And there you see the first occurrence of an asterisk. An asterisk means it's going to cost more than $500,000. It's a big ticket item. Actually, that one's about $900,000. We need to keep an eye out on the exterior stone facade at SRS and repair it as needed. We have a couple underground storage tanks there that in the future we need to take a look at removing those. We need to automate the cooling system over there, and we need to continue to replace those annex windows at over $1 million into the future. At Wallingford Elementary, not too far behind NPE as far as being one of our newer buildings, complete renovation and new construction 2013. And we have a nice screen to look at there. Really, in the short term, we need to replace a section of the roof that's over the library. That was not replaced when we renovated the building. And really beyond that, we don't have anything. Strathaven Middle School, also a fairly new building with a renovation and new construction in 2010. Here we see the occurrence of check marks. Check marks they're done. We've had some window repair on this side of the building that we are now. We've had some water infiltration that we've had to deal with because this new part of the building was built on a hill. We had our wrestling mats that we needed to find a way to store. We put in LED lighting in the auditorium. And we need to automate the lighting at the middle school as well for $112,500. Going off into the future for the middle school, we have upgrades to the electrical service here as well. We have to continue to replace and repair the windows on this side of the building. We're going to need to resurface the asphalt. We think we're going to need to reinforce the bus ramp. And the bus ramp is that area in the lower parking lot here where the buses come up closest to the building above the parking lot. And the bus compound, or the bus building, is going to need to be expanded for a total of $347,500. And now we move on to the high school. With the latest renovation in 2000 with some new construction. The pool hasn't seen renovations since construction in 1970s. Our locker room area with no real renovations either since the 1970s. So the list is going to be extensive, and I'll prepare you now. So through the next year, music equipment storage over there has been difficult for a long time. If you've ever walked through the hallways, you will notice. We'd like to put in a mezzanine for that. We'd like to renovate the locker room area, and this is really going into the next year because this would be at a price tag of about $2.9 million. And that would take care of the fact that it really hasn't been renovated. The foods classroom needs a renovation. Our modular classrooms that are out back really need to have a new floor put in. We need to upgrade our visitor entrances. We've replaced part of our fire alarm system already. We need to replace the public address system and the auditorium sound system. For a total of $4.156 million over the next year, with that locker room renovation going into the following year, keeping in mind that that locker room renovation is at $2.9 million. And beyond that, we have upgrades to the electrical service there. We'll be at a point where we'll have to have a major HVAC upgrade, heating and ventilation and air conditioning, with a resurfacing of the asphalt, upgrading the lighting at the high school for LED. We need to continue to upgrade the fire alarm system. The previous one was done because it failed over the summer. And then we need to continue to have upgrades with our modular classrooms for a total projected of over $7 million. It was noted that the pool we really haven't touched the pool significantly other than minor repairs here and there. So the topic of potentially an upcoming pool renovation should be dealt with. And if we were to do that, we would replace the tile on the deck and in the pool, upgrade the mechanical and the electrical systems, as well as dealing with the ceiling and potentially reinforcement of the ceiling, depending upon the mechanical systems, at a total projected for that entire project of $1.4 million. And then we end outside with our athletic fields and grounds. So through the next year, we need to modify King Field bleachers. We need handrails. We need better accessibility on our King Field bleachers. We've put in a new roof for the Panther Pit in preparation for the solar panels that are going on the Panther Pit. We've done a varsity baseball field restoration. We've taken care of some drainage issues in the senior parking lot. And we're preparing for the possibility of LED marquee signs for the high school, the middle school, and we're really still working on the plans for that, for a total of $156,000. And then beyond that King Field artificial turf we have, it's going to come to its life expectancy, and we'll need to replace that, as well as convert the grass that is around the King Field to the carpet as well. And then we are monitoring a drainage issue between King Field and the baseball field for a total of $710,000. So what does it all look like? If we put it all together, building by building, in what I call the short term through the end of next year, and then beyond that, we're looking at over $15 million if we were to put this all down on paper. And that's what's important, is to get this down on paper so that however we proceed, we're planning for it. Questions?
Thank you for the presentation, Ferg. I guess the question came to me when you were talking about the pool and the locker rooms, and I think we've talked about this, but then I want to make sure, and then I want to ask the question about the middle school and the elementary schools. But are gender-neutral bathrooms or areas going into the planning for the high school locker room renovation is question one.
Yes.
And then how about the middle school and the elementary schools? Where do we have gender-neutral bathrooms in the middle school and the elementary schools?
Well, we have unisex bathrooms in all areas. We don't have, at the middle school, we have traditional locker rooms. So we would move towards that, I would anticipate. While it's not in our plans yet, I would see, after we proceed with the high school, working down to the middle school for that as well.
Okay, but in terms of, that makes sense, and that was a catch I didn't even make, so thank you for offering that. That was generous. We do, in the middle school and in each of the elementary schools, have at least one gender-neutral bathroom. Am I understanding you correctly? You said areas, and I want to make sure that's buildings.
I would want to confirm that in each and every building, but as I understand it, there is a bathroom that is considered to be a unisex bathroom.
Okay, I would love to get confirmation of that.
I will.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, thank you, Ferg.
Thank you.
All right, so now, thank you for both of those focus topics, which obviously have a great deal of relevance as we plan for the future. We move on to audience recognition for items for action on the agenda this evening. Is there anyone who would like to speak tonight related to topics on the agenda? Okay. So seeing none, we'll move on to our first item for action, which is the approval of the minutes from the February 10th regular business meeting, and I so move. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Chapin. Any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Okay. So the item passes 8 to 0 to 1. Okay, 8 to 0 to 1. All right. Next, we move on to personnel. We have 10 items for action in personnel this evening. Are there any items on the list anyone would like separated? Okay. So moving through all of them, first we have the approval of leaves of absence for 3 certified staff and 2 non-certified staff as listed in the agenda. Next, we have the approval of 1 retirement of Mary Charlotte Petrus, a special education teacher at SRS, effective the end of the day on June 19th, 2020. Then we have the approval of 1 appointment, John Casper, a math teacher at the middle school, effective February 14th through on or about March 6th, 2020. We have 3 changes of assignment as listed in the agenda. We have 1 additional assignment as listed in the agenda. We have a change in salary status for Brian Picknally, moving from Bachelor's Step 2 to Master's Step 2. We have the approval of the transportation change of hours effective February 3rd as stipulated in the agenda. We have the approval of the non-supplemental theater positions for the 2020 spring musical at the high school, including John Anderson and John Miko as pit musicians as listed in the agenda. And we have the approval of 1 conference request for Bruce Vogel from the maintenance department. And finally, we have the approval of the 2020 spring musical chaperones for the middle school play as stipulated in the agenda. And all of these are as attached or described in the agenda. Do I have a motion? Kelly. Do we have a second? Second. Thank you, Marilyn. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? The items pass 9-0. Okay, moving on to curriculum, we have one item for action, which is the approval of the 2019-2020 school year related service provider contract as stipulated. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Kelly. Do we have a second? Second. Thank you, Michelle. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The item passes 9-0. We move on to finance. We have 9 items for approval in finance, but I'm going to separate out the last item since it's a little longer. First, we have the approval of payment of invoices to vendors dated January 21st, 2020 to February 18th, 2020 as attached. We have the approval of the treasurer's report for January 2020. We have the acknowledgement of receipt of the financial statements from January 2020 as stipulated in the agenda. We have the approval of the attached resolution concerning the regional wide area network service order, the E-rate letter of agency with the Delaware County Intermediate Unit 25, and service order for the regional wide area network services as stipulated and in the attachment. We have the approval of an agreement with PowerSchool for the upgrade of Cognos not to exceed $4,110. We have the approval of a 48-month lease agreement with Rohrer Bus Company and/or their financing branch subject to solicitor review, and approval of final wording of lease documents at a proposed total cost of $1,265,104, with equal payments of $316,276 due July 2020 through July 2023 for 24 72-passenger school buses and 2 48-passenger buses with wheelchair lifts. And then we have the acknowledgement of the receipt of the 5-year capital plan, which we just heard about. This is a working document and will be updated as needed. Anything that requires signed contracts will come before the school board. All of these are as attached or described in the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Kelly? Do we have a second?
Second.
Chapin? Thank you. Any discussion?
I actually have a question about the bus contract. We've had contracts with various bus companies in the past. Is this one of our prior relationships?
This is actually one of our more current bus
Okay.
providers.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Other discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? The items pass 9-0. So lastly, in finance, we have the adoption of the resolution calling for charter school funding reform, which Dr. Palmer mentioned earlier. And let me pull up that resolution. So bear with me. I'm going to read the resolution. This is a resolution calling for charter school funding reform by the Board of Directors of the Wallingford-Swarthmore School District. Whereas the average Pennsylvania school district spends millions of dollars in taxpayer money annually in mandatory payments to brick-and-mortar and cyber charter schools, and these payments are calculated in a manner which requires districts to send more money to charter schools than is needed to operate their programs, and places a significant financial burden on districts' resources and taxpayers. And whereas the current charter school funding formula was established in 1997 under the state's charter school law and has not been changed in the 23 years since it was created, and the formula for regular education programs is unfair because it is based on a school district's expenditures and not what it actually costs to educate a child in the charter school. And whereas the calculation for charter special education tuition is unfair because it is also based on the special education expenditures of the school district rather than the charter school, and although the General Assembly revised the special education funding formula in 2014 to more accurately target special education resources for students identified with high, medium, and low needs, the formula was only applied to school districts and not to charter schools. And whereas because the tuition rate calculations are based on the school district's expenses, they create wide discrepancies in the amount of tuition paid by different districts for the same charter school education and result in drastic overpayments to charter schools. And these discrepancies in tuition rates for regular education students can vary by almost $13,000 per student and by $39,000 for special education students. And whereas the latest data from the PA Department of Education shows that in 2017-2018, total charter school tuition payments, both cyber and brick and mortar, were more than $1.8 billion, with $519 million of that total paid by districts for tuition to cyber charter schools. And whereas further analysis of PDE data shows that in 2014-15, school districts paid charter schools more than $100 million for special education services in excess of what charter schools reported spending on special education. And whereas the cost of charter schools for school districts continue to grow significantly each year, and on a statewide basis are the most identified source of pressure on school district budgets, and whereas the need for significant charter school funding reform is urgent and school districts are struggling to keep up with the growing charter costs and are forced to raise taxes and cut staffing, program, and services for their own students in order to pay millions of dollars to charter schools. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Wallingford-Swarthmore School Board calls upon the General Assembly to meaningfully revise the existing flawed charter school funding systems for regular and special education to ensure that school districts and taxpayers are no longer overpaying these schools or reimbursing for costs the charter schools do not incur. We are advocating for substantial change. Thank you for allowing me to read that. I think it's an important issue. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Chapin. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kelly. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The item passes 9-0. All right, moving on. It's time for audience recognition for response to topics not on the agenda. So if anyone has a comment related to things we didn't just vote on, now would be the time. So if you want to speak, please go to the podium. Know that what you say will be broadcast and recorded. And by law, the purpose of public comment is to address the board on matters that may come before the board for its consideration. Therefore, the content of any person's address to the board must be on those matters. So if you could go ahead and state your name and address.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name's Todd Strine. I'm a resident of Swarthmore. I'm also the co-publisher of the Swarthmorean newspaper. The reason why I'm here is I want to bring the board's attention to a matter that relates to Power School. As Dr. Palmer indicated, the side of the Power School that relates to the student administration. So as I understand it, there's a deadline. Let me back up. My daughter, Sophia, is a senior at Strathaven High School. And like a lot of seniors, she's waiting to hear from colleges. There are mid-year transcripts that are sent out by the system to all the colleges that the students have applied to. And my understanding is that the deadline for that, for those transcripts to be sent out, was February 1st at the outside. My further understanding is that for some reason, the transcripts that were sent out were not sent out until February 5th. So that potentially can cause issues, obviously, for students whose decisions are pending right about that time. And at this time of year, a lot of colleges are going to committee on applications that they've received, and that final mid-year report would be an important data point in their process deciding about whether to admit a student or not. So the first thing that I think that the board needs to be aware of, because this is a time-sensitive issue and really can't wait a month to be fixed, is that the reports this year were sent out late. The second thing that has come to my attention is that the reports that were sent out, at least in my daughter's case, and potentially in other students' cases, contained inaccuracies. In other words, inaccurate grades were reflected on the transcript for certain courses. And I have reason to believe that my daughter's not the only person who's been affected. Now those, as I mentioned, those incorrect transcripts were sent out on February 5th. I don't believe, at least as far as I know, that anybody was aware that incorrect information was contained in those transcripts until last Wednesday, February 19th. So 2 weeks went by between when the transcripts went out late and when anybody detected that there was a problem with the information that was sent on the transcripts. And again, we're kind of in crunch time with colleges making final admissions decisions. So, as I understand it, the guidance department was flagging the issue to the administration as that deadline, that February 1st deadline approached, that those mid-year reports really needed to get finalized and sent to the schools by February 1st. Despite what I understand to be their best efforts, obviously that didn't happen. I don't believe that the guidance department was aware until last week that there was incorrect information that had been sent out. But once they became aware, it's my understanding that the guidance department is doing everything they can to correct the record by calling the colleges that received the incorrect information. However, I don't think that anybody currently has access to the correct information. In other words, I don't think that you can just go into Power School and generate an accurate and complete mid-year transcript. The reason why I don't think that is I haven't seen one yet for my daughter, and it's been, coming up on a week since we flagged this issue. I don't know how many students are affected by this or how many colleges need to receive this information. Obviously, the guidance department would appear to have limited bandwidth to be able to devote time and resources to actually calling and reaching somebody at these schools, but I know that they're, at least in my daughter's case, using best efforts to do that, and I appreciate their efforts. I certainly do not believe that this problem relates in any way to what guidance did, but I am troubled by the fact that the move to Power School appears to have been done with no thought to redundancy from the legacy system, which apparently didn't have this problem, right? Because my understanding is in previous years, those reports got out by the deadline, and those reports contained accurate information. This is the first year using Power School, and apparently this year, neither of those two things happened. I would like the board to either direct me to the appropriate administrative contacts to review it with and or take action so that the scope of the problem can be identified and that work can be done immediately to reach the colleges that received the incorrect information for any students that it was received for. If anybody has any question, actually, the way this works is I just present. You don't ask any questions, right? At this point, I believe that's all I have.
Well, thank you for bringing that to our attention, and I think as soon as we wrap up here, maybe we can figure out the best way to kind of handle this in a expedient fashion.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Is there anyone else who wanted to make a comment? Okay. Moving on to old business. Do we have any old business?
I actually do.
Okay.
And the facilities presentation reminded me of this. It's something I'd asked Dr. Palmer about to follow up with previously, but I'm remembering that, I can't remember if it was a year ago, we had one of the high school diversity trainers come in and present to us, Alex Melly. And his point for us was to think about or hopefully get more education and orientation going in the elementary school, specifically around gender expression and gender identity. And again, the locker room conversation reminded me of that. I haven't asked in a little while, but I remember my colleague Rob Rieger asking a million times, and now I see the LED sign on there. So I'm going to keep asking about this. So any update?
Ms. Amino, I have to go back and double check exactly where we are. I spoke several times with Dr. Brown, and he was working with the diversity trainers. Right before he left, I knew we were talking about having them come back and do a presentation for the board, but I don't have a definite date on that or what the status is, but our goal was to bring them back. And I apologize, I just don't remember in my notes when he said they would be ready. I have to go back and check with the advisor.
I just want to make sure I'm asking the right thing. Going into elementary schools.
They were revamping what they were doing as the diversity trainers across the board.
Okay, great.
And right before he left, I know he had talked with the advisor. I
Okay.
just don't remember what
Thank
the
you.
final conversation was.
Thanks.
Any other old business? Okay. Oh, thank you. Just pull
So,
closer.
as a member of the,
Yeah, pull closer to
oh,
it.
it does pull, sorry. As a member of the school board subcommittee for the sleep and school start times investigation, I'd like to remind the community that the task force will be hosting a community town hall on Wednesday, March 11th at 6:30 p.m. in the high school. The idea is really for the administration and the different committees to provide updates on various aspects of the investigation, but more importantly, to hear from the community and to have questions answered and to hear your thoughts and concerns about the possibilities of making any changes. So please join us on March 11th. Is that old business?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Any other old business? No. Okay. Do we have any new business?
Yes.
Go for it, Jen.
Great, thanks. I am the board's representative for the DCIU Legislative Council, and I wanted to report back two things. This is mainly for my fellow board members, but it always helps for the public to know what the opportunities are that we on the board could best represent the community's interests. The first one is PSBA is doing what they call Advocacy Day. That is coming up on March 23rd. What it is a way that we, all school leaders, of which board members count, can go to Harrisburg, and in an organized fashion, PSBA will help arrange meetings with our local legislators where we can go in specifically and act, I guess, directly as kind of little mini lobbyists. And take our concerns directly to our state legislators. And as Dr. Palmer read, the cyber charter reform initiative is a big one, as well as basic funding and some Plan Con stuff. But the cyber charter one is one that we might want to show up. We need to register on the PSBA website by, I think it's March 15th. And my understanding is that those who are opposed to the things that we are in support of are fairly well organized, so it's good if we can show up. And then the second thing is the legislative breakfast. If you can't make it to Harrisburg, the DCIU is hosting the local legislators, and all of us are invited May 15th at 7:30 in the morning. Advocacy Day also starts early, and you can spend the night in Harrisburg, so to be ready to go at 8. But those are the two things. So March 23rd, if you can mark your calendar and give some serious thought to going out to Harrisburg, and then the breakfast coming up in May.
Great, thank you, Chapin. Any other new business? Okay, this meeting's adjourned.